Beijing has skillfully navigated trade rules to keep its exports flowing. Meanwhile, food prices in the U.S. climb higher by the day. Retirees are cutting back on meals, students go hungry, and familiar stores shut down for good. It may be time to ask, who is truly losing this trade war? After the Trump administration imposed tariffs of up to 145% on Chinese goods, Beijing responded with a strategic move, routing shipments through intermediary countries like Malaysia to take advantage of the U.S. customs rule on substantial transformation. Under this rule, goods that are repackaged and relabeled in Malaysia can enter the U.S. at lower tariff rates or even tariff-free. This practice has led countries like South Korea, Vietnam, and Thailand to tighten controls to avoid being used as transshipment hubs. China's strategy has helped it maintain exports to the U.S. while minimizing negative impacts on its domestic economy and employment. But for the intermediary nations, it raises new challenges, preventing trade fraud and safeguarding national credibility. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Food at Home Index rose by 2.4% over the past 12 months, while restaurant food prices increased by 3.8%. Notably, EGG prices surged by 60.4% due to the impact of avian influenza, and beef prices climbed by 1.2% in March 2025. Key contributing factors: disease outbreaks, extreme weather, rising production costs, and new tariff policies, disrupting supply chains and further driving up prices. American consumers, especially low-income households, are facing mounting living expenses. Many are being forced to cut spending, switch to cheaper food options, or reduce portion sizes. Soaring food prices are hitting the most vulnerable groups across the United States hard. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Food at Home Index rose 2.4% in the past year. Food away from home prices jumped 3.8%. EGG prices surged 60.4% due to avian influenza, and beef prices rose 1.2% in March 2025. Retirees, students, and freelance workers are struggling with escalating living costs. Many are being forced to cut spending, switch to lower-cost food, or reduce portion sizes just to get by. Charities and food banks are reporting a growing number of people seeking help, a clear warning sign of the deepening cost of living crisis. In 2024, more than 7,300 supermarkets across the United States closed, marking the highest number in the past 4 years. The collapse of major retail chains like Walgreens, CVS, Rite Aid, Costco, Dollar General, Save Mart, Macy's, Nordstrom, and Best Buy reflects a fundamental shift in the U.S. consumer and commercial landscape. Meanwhile, China continues to strengthen its global position through long-term strategy, alliance building, and regional leadership. In contrast, the United States is facing growing internal strain as traditional trade and consumption models struggle to keep pace with current realities. Canada is pulling back from the U.S., millions of Canadians are canceling trips, airlines are cutting flights, and U.S. tourism is bleeding billions. Is America facing a northern shutdown? A growing wave of cancellations is hitting the U.S. tourism industry, as more than 60% of Canadians now say they plan to avoid travel to the United States in 2025, according to new data from Nanos Research. The boycott stems from rising tensions over tariffs and recent controversial remarks by former President Donald Trump. In April, the number of Canadians returning home by car after a U.S. visit fell 35%, the steepest monthly drop since the COVID-19 pandemic. Major airlines, including Air Canada, WestJet, and United Airlines, have already cut thousands of cross-border flights, notably suspending the newly launched Toronto-Los Angeles route. Border towns and popular destinations like New York, Florida, and Las Vegas are reporting sharp declines in Canadian tourists. This has triggered a ripple effect on small businesses, from local diners to family-run hotels, many of which rely heavily on Canadian foot traffic. Without this vital customer base, some are now facing layoffs, reduced hours, or permanent closures. Rather than heading south, Canadian travelers are turning elsewhere. Flights to Mexico and Europe are surging, with Canadian arrivals in Mexico jumping 15.6% in March alone, according to Mexico's tourism department. This shift is being driven by a strong U.S. dollar, new American tax policies, and what many Canadians describe as a less welcoming attitude at the border. This diversion has serious implications for U.S. global tourism competitiveness. As Canada, the U.S.'s second-largest tourism market, redirects its spending abroad, American businesses lose not only visitors, but also influence. The longer this trend continues, the more difficult it becomes for the U.S. to regain lost ground in the international tourism sector. Canada's government has issued new advisories, warning citizens about the broad powers granted to U.S. border agents who may search phones, laptops, and other devices without cause. This has sparked widespread alarm, especially among elderly travelers and those with health conditions who now feel unwelcome or at risk. Fewer border crossings mean fewer tourists spending money in American communities. Many towns, especially those dependent on cross-border shopping and medical tourism, are seeing visitor numbers fall, cutting into revenues for local clinics, pharmacies, and retail outlets. This downturn jeopardizes jobs and income in regions already struggling with economic stagnation. The U.S. is already seeing real economic fallout. According to the U.S. Travel Association, a 10% drop in Canadian visitors would slash $2 billion from the U.S. economy and eliminate over 14,000 American jobs. If the current trajectory holds, 2025 losses could reach $4.3 billion in tourism-related revenue, including $200 million in local sales tax. That tax loss hits municipal budgets hard, shrinking funding for police, firefighters, public health services, and infrastructure projects. For many communities, especially those in rural or border states, Canadian tourism dollars are not a bonus, they are a lifeline.
Why is China pouring tens of billions of dollars into Africa while the United States appears to be stepping back? Is this silent competition reshaping the balance of power on the continent? In 2024, China committed $51 billion in direct investment and signed $70.7 billion in construction contracts across Africa, more than 15 times. The U.S. foreign aid budget for the region, which stands at $8 billion through USAID. According to the Asia Society, 75% of respondents in the region view Beijing positively, while only 25% hold a negative opinion. A survey by Afrobarometer across 34 African countries found that 63% of citizens see China's influence as very or somewhat positive, while just 15% perceive it negatively. This is reflected in tangible results over 10,000 kilometers of roads. Hundreds of schools, hospitals, and bridges have been built with Chinese support. These projects directly improve daily life, easing transportation, expanding access to education, and enhancing healthcare services. While the United States continues to focus on humanitarian aid, China's model of infrastructure for resources is generating strong and visible impact. The Democratic Republic of the Congo currently supplies approximately 70% of the world's cobalt, a key material used in electric vehicle batteries and high-tech devices. China has made substantial investments in this sector, holding stakes in 15 of the country's largest cobalt and copper mines. In 2024, Chinese companies committed to investing $7 billion in infrastructure in the DRC, including roads and power plants, under a Resource for Infrastructure agreement. Meanwhile, the United States continues to prioritize humanitarian aid, allocating $8 billion to the entire African continent through USAID for the fiscal year 2024. This difference in approach has a direct impact on the daily lives of local populations. In the DRC, Chinese-backed infrastructure projects have improved transportation and electricity access, helping to foster economic development. In contrast, USAID has mainly focused on healthcare and education, offering long-term benefits in public health and literacy. In early 2025, the Trump administration decided to end funding for PEPFAR, the U.S. president's emergency plan for AIDS relief, which had provided approximately $440 million annually to South Africa's HIV/AIDS prevention and treatment efforts. This decision threatens the jobs of around 15,000 healthcare workers and affects over 5.5 million people currently receiving antiretroviral treatment in a country with the world's highest HIV infection rate. In response, the South African government increased its 2025 health budget by 28.9 billion rand, approximately $1.5 billion US dollars. However, to offset the financial gap, the government was compelled to raise the value-added tax by 0.5%, leading to higher prices for essential goods and services. The reduction in aid has not only strained the public healthcare system, but also added financial pressure on citizens. Meanwhile, other nations such as China continue to expand their presence through development investment and infrastructure support, raising questions about the future of U.S. influence on the continent. The United States and China have entered what may be the most intense phase of confrontation to date. With record-high tariffs, the formation of new alliances, and growing pressure on nations to take sides, prices, employment, and the security of millions are being directly impacted. Is there a constructive resolution on the horizon for this geopolitical struggle? The United States has raised tariffs on electric vehicles from 25% to 100%, and on steel and aluminum to 50%, along with a 70% tariff on numerous other goods. For some products, the average tariff has surged from 54% to as high as 145%. This move is expected to drive up prices for electric vehicles, energy equipment, and electronics in the U.S., directly impacting consumer spending. American businesses that rely on Chinese components may face rising costs, leading to further pricing pressure. At the same time, the U.S. has issued warnings to other nations not to assist China in circumventing tariffs by altering the country of origin. This creates added pressure on exporting countries such as Vietnam. Without transparent traceability, the risk of shipments being held or penalized is significant. The U.S. and India have set a target to raise bilateral trade to $500 billion by 2030, up from approximately $192 billion as of March 2025, according to the U.S. Trade Representative, USTR. On April 15, 2025, the two nations signed a preliminary trade agreement as part of the deal. India committed to increasing its imports of liquefied natural gas, LNG, from the U.S. to 10 million tons per year by 2027, nearly double the current volume, in order to reduce dependence on Chinese and Russian LNG. American citizens in LNG exporting states like Texas and Louisiana may benefit through job creation and rising incomes. In India, residential electricity prices in industrial states are projected to drop from 7.6 to 7.2 rupees per kilowatt hour by 2026. Beginning February 2025, India has imposed a 12% tariff on Chinese steel, an import market worth over $2.4 billion annually, to combat dumping practices. According to Reuters, this measure is expected to protect more than 320,000 jobs in the steel industry. As a result, Indian citizens may benefit from more stable prices in electricity and steel. China has increased subsidies for its steel industry, pushing low-cost steel exports to 94 million tons in 2024. According to Bloomberg, this surge has placed significant pressure on the steel sectors of the US, the EU, and India. Numerous factories have been forced to scale back production, directly affecting more than 320,000 workers. As of January 2025, China has suspended the export of rare earth materials worth $780 million to South Korea. This has impacted more than 37 defense companies, currently collaborating with Lockheed Martin and Raytheon. According to Yonhap, several production lines for radar and air defense systems have been temporarily halted due to raw material shortages in Canada. Public concern has grown over data security and electoral transparency, following allegations that China interfered in the national election by spreading disinformation aimed at discrediting 5 candidates known for their tough stance on Beijing, according to CBC. The scale of this interference has been likened to that of Russia's involvement in the US elections in 2016. The primary objective of Trump is to prevent China from using third-party countries to bypass US tariffs. In this context, China has sought to engage Southeast Asian nations but has encountered resistance. Vietnam, Malaysia, and Thailand have publicly stated they will not serve as transit hubs for Chinese goods. Notably, Vietnam signed a contract to purchase 26 F-16 Block 70-72 fighter jets worth $2.56 billion, marking a significant step forward in defense cooperation with the U.S., according to Defense News. In response, China canceled its order of 48 Boeing 737 MAX aircraft valued at $6.5 billion. However, just 2 weeks later, Indonesia and the Philippines placed orders to purchase the entire batch, as reported by Nikkei Asia. President Trump has launched a sweeping tariff offensive, triggering surging prices, market volatility, and a looming retaliation from Europe. Can American consumers weather this economic storm? On April 7, 2025, President Trump unveiled the Liberation Day tariff package, imposing a 10% tariff on all imports and higher rates on specific countries, 20% on the European Union, 46% on Vietnam, and 145% on China. The total value of goods subject to tariffs during his second term has surpassed $1 trillion and could reach $3 trillion if fully implemented. Prices of food, medicine, and electronics have soared, a poll by AP. NORC found that 52% of Americans oppose the blanket tariffs, with 60% believing the policy has gone too far. Major retailers, including Walmart, Target, and Home Depot, have met with the president to raise concerns over rising costs and potential supply shortages. U.S. factories are facing higher input costs due to reliance on parts from the EU, which could lead to wage cuts or layoffs. A 24% tariff on Japanese goods has delayed shipments of the Nintendo Switch 2, crashing pre-order systems on major retail sites like Target and Best Buy. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen declared that all measures are on the table in response to U.S. tariffs. The EU is preparing to impose tariffs on $28 billion worth of American goods, including automobiles, whiskey, and agricultural products. Europe is reinforcing trade agreements with more than 76 countries, including Mercosur, Mexico, and upcoming deals with India and ASEAN, while strengthening internal market integration to reduce dependence on the U.S. American farmers face mounting export risks, especially in corn. Soybeans and beef states like Iowa, Nebraska, and Texas are expected to bear the brunt in the beverage industry. Breweries in Asheville, North Carolina, report a sharp rise in aluminum can costs due to disrupted European supply chains. U.S. financial markets have endured their worst quarter since 2022. The S&P 500 dropped 4.6%, NASDAQ fell 10.4%, and the Dow Jones slid 2.2%. Investor uncertainty over Trump's tariff policy has rattled the markets. Goldman Sachs has raised the probability of a U.S. recession to 45%, predicting the Federal Reserve will cut interest rates 3 times in 2025. Falling stock values have alarmed retirees, with heavy sell-offs reported in personal investment accounts and 401k retirement funds. Consumer sentiment is weakening. The Conference Board's March 2025 Consumer Confidence Index dropped by 11 points from the previous month. A new type of battery is drawing serious attention across the electric vehicle industry. Could this be the beginning of a new era of ultra-affordable, long-lasting, and safer electric vehicles? Contemporary Amperex technology Co-Limited CATL. The world's leading battery manufacturer has officially unveiled its next-generation sodium-ion battery line named Naxtra. This marks a significant technological advancement in the field of energy storage. Naxtra batteries reach an energy density of 175 UHkD, the highest ever recorded for sodium-ion technology, and on par with current lithium iron phosphate LFP batteries. This allows electric vehicles powered by sodium-ion batteries to travel up to 500 kilometers on a single charge, making them viable for both pure electric and hybrid mode. Remarkably, these batteries can endure more than 10,000 charge-discharge cycles, far surpassing conventional lithium-ion batteries. This equates to a potential lifetime mileage of up to 4.8 million kilometers, significantly reducing battery replacement costs over a vehicle's lifespan. One of the most notable features of CATL's new sodium-ion battery is its ability to operate efficiently in extreme cold, addressing a long-standing challenge in EV performance. The battery can charge from 30% to 80% in just 30 minutes at minus 30 degrees C, and retains 93% of its usable capacity in such low temperatures. Even at minus 40 degrees C, the battery delivers enough power for a vehicle to maintain speeds of 120 km/h, even when the state of charge reads 0%. This breakthrough ensures greater reliability for EV users in cold climate regions such as Northern Europe, North America, and mountainous areas. It enhances road safety and user confidence by minimizing battery-related risks under harsh weather conditions. CATL's advanced charging technology enables the Naxtra battery to deliver 520 kilometers of driving range with just a 5-minute charge, with peak charging speeds reaching 12 C, equivalent to a power rate of approximately 1,000 kilowatts, and a consistent output of over 500 kilowatt at 50% charge level. This ultra-fast charging performance significantly reduces wait times for consumers. This experience is comparable to refueling a gasoline vehicle, addressing common concerns around EV charging time and accelerating the broader adoption of electric mobility. The sodium-ion battery has undergone rigorous safety testing, including multi-directional compression, nail penetration, electric drilling, and saw-cut tests. In all scenarios, the battery showed no signs of smoke fire or sudden thermal spikes, an indicator of its high safety standard. CATL has achieved this by incorporating stable materials and a specialized electrolyte structure that effectively mitigates the risk of overheating or combustion. This provides additional peace of mind for EV users, particularly in the event of collisions or technical failures. With production costs around 30% lower than lithium iron phosphate, LFP batteries thanks to the use of abundant sodium instead of lithium. This innovation is expected to make electric vehicles more affordable for a wider population. Sodium being widely available and easier to extract reduces reliance on critical minerals such as lithium, cobalt, and nickel. This shift not only stabilizes raw material supply and pricing, but also reduces the environmental impact associated with mining rare metals. CATL plans to begin mass production of the sodium-ion battery in December 2025, marking a key milestone in the commercialization of this promising technology. Canada is severing vital ties with the United States, from energy and security to politics. What is happening after the statement? Canada is the 51st state. And why are citizens calling for national self-defense? Manitoba Hydro, one of Canada's major energy providers, has terminated 2 electricity export contracts to the United States equivalent to 500 megawatts per day. Following former President Donald Trump's announcement of a 25% tariff on Canadian energy and goods, the redirected power will now serve domestic regions such as Nunavut, Saskatchewan, and Ontario. The Manitoba provincial government stated this move is part of an effort to reclaim energy. sovereignty amid ongoing trade dependence on the U.S. However, the decision may leave Manitoba Hydro facing up to CAD 25 billion in debt, prompting the company to propose an 11% electricity rate increase, starting in 2026 to offset revenue. Losses residents in Manitoba and Ontario may face increased financial pressure as electricity prices rise during a time of climbing living costs. The exit from the U.S. energy market also presents long-term questions for Canada regarding energy security and export diversification. Amid rising trade and political tensions between Canada and the United States, former President Trump has repeatedly referred to Canada as the 51st state. This rhetoric has raised concerns about bilateral relations and Canada's national security. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney publicly rejected President Trump's remarks, emphasizing the importance of defending Canada's sovereignty and independence. He also called for increased defense spending and reduced reliance on the U.S. in security matters. Both the Liberal and Conservative parties have expressed support for strengthening national defense and diversifying international partnerships. In Canada's Parliament, some members questioned whether NATO would intervene in the event of a conflict between Canada and the U.S. Under Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty, NATO responds only when a member is attacked by an external force. As such, a dispute between two NATO members may not prompt intervention, raising concerns about Canada's independent defense capabilities. Many Canadians have expressed anxiety about the future of the country and its relationship with the United States. Citizens are urging the government to strengthen ties with other international partners and invest in national defense to safeguard sovereignty and security. Canadians are increasingly aware of the need to reduce dependence on the United States and strengthen national autonomy. U.S. tariff policies and controversial statements by President Trump have fueled a wave of nationalism and a call for broader international engagement. A survey by Angus Reid found that 91% of Canadians support reducing reliance on the U.S., while 90% oppose the idea of Canada becoming the 51st state. In response, many citizens have joined Buy Canadian campaigns, boycotted American products, and canceled travel to the U.S. apps like MapleScan. And Buy Canadian have grown in popularity, helping consumers identify local products. On the political front, Canadian parties are advocating for increased defense spending and stronger relations with international partners. However, efforts to diversify markets and reduce U.S. dependence face several challenges, including high defense costs and geographic distance from alternative trade partners. Case IH, a $34.5 billion. Agricultural equipment giant withdraws from the U.S. Over 3,000 American workers lose their jobs. Towns reel and farmers face part shortages mid-season. Following Case IH's exit, could this shock mark the beginning of a global restructuring wave pulling out of the United States? In early April 2025, Case IH, the tractor and agricultural machinery brand under CNH Industrial, unexpectedly issued an internal memo announcing the closure of all its manufacturing facilities in the United States. This includes the main assembly plant in Racine, Wisconsin, and the engine production center in Fargo, North Dakota. According to CNH Industrial, the decision is part of a global strategic restructuring, shifting operations to Brazil, Germany, and India to leverage lower labor costs and tariff incentives. Case IH's withdrawal immediately resulted in over 3,200 American workers losing their jobs. The move delivers a significant blow to the $34.5 billion U.S. agricultural machinery industry, already under strain from global competition and rising material costs. Post-pandemic, the National Farmers Union warned Case IH's exit puts 1 in 4 large farms in the Midwest at risk of operational disruption due to a lack of timely replacement parts. Beyond the direct layoffs, thousands of indirect jobs across the supply chain, from forges and transport firms to control software companies, are also at risk of being wiped out. In Racine, Wisconsin, where the Case IH plant had operated since 1969, over 1,800 workers were laid off. The town, once reliant on agricultural equipment manufacturing, now faces widespread economic collapse. According to the local planning department, unemployment in Racine surged from 4.3% to 11.7% within just 2 weeks of Case IH's announcement.